again and just kind of what you do and a little bit background.
My name is Stuart, and I'm the executive director of CHUM, which is a group of 43 congregations here in Duluth that have come together to run the homeless shelter and the food bank and food shelf and other sorts of support systems for people at the very bottom of the economic rung here in Duluth. I kind of remember the ozone layer and things like that when we actually did mobilize, and the Clean Water Act, and we did mobilize. I was part of the first Earth Day when I was a high school student. We did mobilize, but the ozone hole we kind of handled, and that was a global environmental crisis. And in those years, we thought we could do something about it, and we did. Now we have had something which we've known about since, I'm going to say, the mid-60s. By the time I got to undergraduate education in 1971, it was not news to people in leadership. It was news to me as a 17-year-old, but it wasn't news to me, to the world. I think that it generally takes 20 years from something to be at the cutting edge of science to being in popular knowledge. And so if you think about the way that relativity came in, that was 1905, but it certainly wasn't, kind of something that you would study in undergraduate physics as an early thing in your physics exam until after 1960. So that's like 50 years before it came deep into, the learning. And so if you look at other, even cell theory earlier on, like how did we get, or the disease theory, how did we get to that? How long did it take before something stopped being in the scientific world and there's generally a transition time. The idea of we're all stardust, that took, that people have been talking about that in astronomy and astrophysics for decades, but it's only relatively recently become popular science. Easy for me to go on to San Diego State, work with Phil Miller, be up in the Arctic. My teammates were working on enhanced carbon dioxide around plants and what that means. I was heating up the tundra to look at the difference between decomposition and plant growth. I was looking at the change in oxygenation in soils as a consequence of melt of permafrost by heating the darn stuff up. I mean, we're looking at the different ways roots grew if you heated the plants up. We were looking at evaporation, the Penman equations for how does the tundra evaporate. And we were doing it before a lot of computers, so we'd stay up 5 days in a row taking a measurement every minute or every 10 minutes, and then turn that into our models. I can share the paper. I mean, and it wasn't all about. It was in ecology, and it wasn't all about climate change, but it was about how do those physical parameters interact. And anybody who was cognizant and awake in I'm going to say about now in 1977, because get to graduate school, was that there was indeed a big likelihood, because of the energy budget of the Earth and the increased absorption from carbon dioxide and methane. We didn't have as big a deal on methane then. We were looking more at CO2 rather than methane production, but of course we now know there's more of that as well. That there was likely to be a switch in the equilibrium of the atmosphere of the Earth, and the energy budget of the Earth was changing, and the surface of the Earth was changing, and that would happen primarily in northern latitudes. And even that, people don't make sense, because if you have an increase of 9 degrees C, or 5 degrees C, when it's already 30 degrees C, that's one kind of change. If you have it where it goes the difference between 0 degrees and not, that's different. People think because scientists change their minds or things evolve, that means they're wrong and they don't know anything. There's totally profound misunderstanding of what science is all about. And I think that's been a calculated thing that's been going on for a very long time. And I've been I moved away from that and started doing the social systems analysis and work. So I didn't see it coming. but I have seen it arrive. Particularly, I mean, CHUM is the safety net for the poorest people in Duluth, the people without homes, the people who are hungry.
Mm-hmm.
And although climate change writ large is a survival issue for all of us as a human people, it doesn't get on my radar if I don't have a place to sleep tonight. Reduce your own carbon, reduce your family carbon.
Mm-hmm.
Advocate for science education, study physics, and invest in solutions and people who are going to make hard choices to change our energy systems to something which is rational and sustainable. That's what I would say.